then we'll move to approval of the minutes.
I move that we accept the minutes.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Those in favor of approving the minutes from the previous meeting? Unanimous. And we're going to start with public participation tonight. This is the open comment period for all things other than Alpine Balsam Area Plan. Is there any public participation for those? Perfect. All right, we'll close open comment period.
I'm signed up. Are you here for Alpine Balsam? You see, Alpine Balsam is part of everything. And everything is part of Alpine. You can't separate it out.
So we have a specific comment period for Alpine Balsam that we're going to cover tonight.
And when is that?
That is,
The movie that goes till 7:30. Rocky Flats, the preview. I've been waiting 7 years, and it's the preview tonight.
so we're going to get a staff update, board questions, and then public comment after those. So that's probably going to take 45-ish minutes.
Okay, I'm probably not going to make it for that.
I have a similar conflict that I need to.
Okay, we'll allow comment then.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Well,
Let's do it in order.
You'll allow
Yes,
on Alpine.
yes, you can speak
Sweet,
on Alpine
okay,
Balsam
okay.
now. We'll allow.
Now, last night, this is Lynn Siegel, 538 Dewey. I'm surprised you're just on here, you're on the planning board, but.
Ex officio member.
I'm a non-voting ex officio
Oh, okay,
liaison.
okay, yeah. Okay, regarding last night, the council was entertaining a ballot measure that we should effectively pay through the city. We can give loans for permanently affordable housing through restricted deeds, deed stuff. And that's a concern for me because affordable housing, the demand for affordable housing is so high because we allow such high-end housing in Boulder. In the senior community, the example, 311 Mapleton, there were 5 subsidies given by city council for that development, yet they bring in $10,000 to $50,000 a month and $1 to $2 million per person, per 300 feet. It can be bigger, but it's a communal thing. But still, that's a lot of money, and I don't think they need subsidies. And each high-end development in Boulder, which you can't help sometimes, right? Because we allowed Google here. Now we have all the people that can pay. And then that creates the wealth discrepancy, right? The wealth inequality. And then we have much more low-end, demand for housing, and more homeless, and more of all of this. So I'm not going to vote for that thing that they've got on the ballot, that I should pay with my city dollars to give down payments for people for affordable housing. I'd love to be able to do that, but I would only do that if I know the city of Boulder stops these subsidies. Down at 21st and Pearl, they've developed a huge office complex there, WW Reynolds. It's taking up all of the local neighborhood uses, like the yoga place, the art place, the dance place, the mattress place, and the unfinished furniture store right by Spruce Pool. That's going to be all office complex. And they have the audacity to brag that they are serving as office space, and this is the opposite of jobs housing, for the housing that's down the street on 21st and 23rd Pearl that's $2 million, luxury apartments. This is not okay. And you got to do something about it. I don't envy your job, but you got to do something strong about this to stop the problem. Otherwise, you're going to be chasing the tail, the dog, the tail. Can't do that.
You didn't speak about Alpine Balsam?
Oh, Alpine Balsam. Oh.
You have 20 seconds.
Alpine Balsam, the same thing, the same situation. They're asking to put all this affordable housing and this density in the center of town, in the most expensive part, which is not the best use. We'll get many more units outside in the perimeter of the city. That the center of Boulder, that the north-south corridor on Broadway is too constrained. We cannot flood it with more. The hotel on the hill, that'll add to it. It can't be done. No density on Alpine. I mean, 50, and they took away the lowest. That's not okay.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thanks. So you can go back.
Oh, can I vote? I'm speaking about Alpine Balsam.
So who had the time constraint? We're only doing time constraints right now, so
She has a time constraint. She
Yes.
can't even go to the movies.
Is that Karen?
I was in town.
No, I'm Elizabeth Hondor.
okay,
She would come to the movies.
perfect.
too,
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Can't do that either.
Yeah. She can't do this.
I have family obligations. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Hondorf. Nice to meet you guys. Great board. I served on BOZA, my husband and I together, 11 years. We didn't do it together after each other. He passed away. We never had an ex officio. That would have been great. So that's just really nice to see the boards evolving. So I'm here to talk about the traffic plan for Alpine Balsam. I've been on 4th and 2724th Street since '76. I met with Steve Pomerantz, who was on the city council for 10 years, and Aaron Brockett wants to speak about this too. And we went through the traffic plan, and there are some discrepancies and problems with it that we see. I think one of the reasons is because the project is evolving, and the facts the traffic people had in the beginning are changing. It's like a living document. One of the major miscalculations in the plan is that they've only done 1 hour traffic studies in the morning and in the evening for commuters. And we know that people have flex schedules, and it's more like 2 hours in the morning and the evening. I'd like to get it down better by the traffic study people after our meeting. Also, they didn't really get a good count on the evolving issue of city and county workers living there or working there. And we know that they come in and out all day, so there's more traffic than projected. And the future projection of this, I have a business degree, I took statistics. It's based on, past use and stuff, and it's always, not exact. And their future projection of the traffic that's going to be there in the next 10 years is based on the past growth. And it's wrong, because we're putting a lot more density and talking more density for Iris, for Alpine. So the traffic growth is going to be greater than what they're saying in 10 years. So I just think the thing is invalid at this point. It needs to be gone over and reviewed by the professionals, and before we can make judgments on what the traffic will be. The other thing was, now it's coming up on a ballot, this council said last night, about voting on deed restrictions and for people that are going to provide affordable housing. And if we get, say, 200, 300 deed restricted units in our neighborhood, that's going to be more density and more parking cars coming through that aren't counted in. So that's part of the future component. So that's what I have to say, that you need to ask that this traffic study be redone, and I request that you speak with Steve Pomerantz, and Mr. Brockett has agreed to listen to our argument. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Apologize for going out of order, everyone, but I wanted to make sure we get as much public participation surrounding this matter as possible. So before we jump into the staff update, I just want to welcome our newest member, Daniel Teodoro. Is that the right?
Teodoro.
Teodoro.
Yes.
Who goes by Danny. So we'll be calling him Danny from here on. Anything you'd like to say?
I'm very pleased to be here. I'm looking forward to working with you all.
And make sure you speak closely to the
Yes.
mic.
Okay, very pleased to be here. I'm looking forward to working with everybody, and I think there are some very challenging but very rewarding issues here that we're tackling, and so thanks for having me, and look forward to it.
And I also wanted to take one moment to thank Jeff Egan, our former staff liaison. So he's been switched out. Jay Sugnet will be our staff liaison officially going forward. So welcome, Jay. Thank you. I know you've been with us multiple times, but Welcome aboard. Hope you're ready for the ride. And with that being said, we'll move into the Alpine Balsam Area Plan staff update. And take it away, Jean.
Great. Good evening. And good evening again. Feels like we were just here talking about this only a few weeks ago. And I've really appreciate several of the members' participation at some of our community events over the last couple of weeks. So I'm on green. I guess I'll get closer. Okay. So again, I really appreciate board members coming out and talking with members of the community at our events. And so I know that probably a number of you will be a little more familiar with some of the materials. I brought some. I'm just going to go over it at a high level since we did talk about this. And Danny, I'm sorry, you're going to do a quick up to speed on this project. As we've discussed, the Alpine Balsam Area Plan will provide definition for the future vision of the area in lots of different ways: land use, urban design, access and mobility. And as we know, one of the key drivers for the purchase of the Boulder Community Hospital site is both for consolidation of city services and for affordable housing. And what we've been looking at for the area plan are opportunities for housing in the area. I'll just refresh us on our goals and objectives for the area plan, again, around land use, urban design, public realm, public spaces, local government services, access, mobility, sustainability, and housing. Our housing objectives include creating that diverse and affordable housing with a variety of housing types, sizes, prices, balancing market rate and permanently affordable use units, and also serving various community needs. So our discussion tonight, we'd like to get your feedback, and I know that several of you that were at the community events also have seen the materials and probably were asking those community members and hearing responses about some of these questions as well. So what we intend to do is, part of the schedule is that the council and the planning board reviewed the options and components of the plan that we shared in June. We've shared those options and components with community members. We're getting a lot of feedback, really good conversations and good discussions with folks at the 3 different events that we've held as open houses. We've also held a couple of walking tours that were more focused on the connections plan. And we have feedback coming in on the Be Heard Boulder online website through tomorrow. So, and similar to the feedback that we've received all along through this process, we have a lot of mixed viewpoints, not really clear preferences all the way around. So we're gonna, but we've had really very thoughtful feedback from folks too. So we'll be summarizing that for our decision makers as that's moving forward. All of that feedback is serving to what we were asked to do is develop a recommended draft plan, and we'll be back to the planning board and the council with a draft plan in August. And so we're seeking feedback from the Housing Advisory Board members, similar questions about that, around the housing policies and components of this plan, both for the hospital redevelopment site and for the area around it. Opportunities for housing the site, opportunities in the area. And I think we talked a little bit about this, and I'm happy to talk some more about it, about we've been asked to keep on the table this option of Boulder County relocating from their Iris and Broadway campus to Alpine Balsam. It has an implication on the amount of housing that we can achieve at Alpine Balsam, but then presumably there would be an opportunity for redevelopment of housing at Iris. Many factors that have to be determined with that, but we are asking folks about the appropriateness of that and what factors we might want to make sure that we're considering if there's some criteria as this was moving forward. And then I think we talked a little bit about this last time as well of while we don't want to be absolutely specific to put ourselves in a box with this area plan about what type of housing, affordability, and populations we might be trying to serve, because this will be a longer process, and will be dependent on, as I understand, what partners we might be able to work with, what tax credits might be there, what some of the needs are in the coming years as we do more work. So, but again, I think that it's the area plan is to set intention about what happens, and so if there's advice from the board around some of those affordability types that we might want to include. So, as we discussed, we walked through these last month. We had 5 different options that we shared with the planning board and council that had different emphasis for land uses and different ways we might achieve the goals around housing and mixed use and area character. And the council and the planning board provided direction to take one of those off the table, the one that was really about more current trends, less opportunity for growth. Okay, I'll get closer to the microphone. And so we have on the table the 4 different options that emphasize housing, or one that's a little more density to more strongly emphasize the housing, more emphasizing mixed use, and then, as I mentioned, an option that keeps the Boulder County relocation on the table. And I'll amend what I said a minute ago about some of the community feedback. I will say that for areas not on the site, for the some of the questions around emphasizing conversion of some of the non-residential, the existing non-residential areas to housing or to mixed use, there is a more of a preference on the mixed use part of what we're hearing from community members. Let's see. So we have some different land use options. I left some of the copies. I didn't do one packet for everybody because I know some of you are pretty familiar with these, of some of the materials that we've had at the community events that spell out what each of those options are, and there's an at-a-glance that's also with the land use options. The colors, there's more definition in your booklets about talking about what those land uses are and what they might look like. Clearly, it's a range of different unit types, what they might look like even within those ranges. So, options for the site. The question to the board is how to best address affordable housing goals regarding opportunities on the site. We have within the options, a couple there. One's more of a mix of unit types from the high-density residential 1. That's the townhome style that would be on the western part of the site. And then a mix of high-density residential 2 and 3, which are depict 3- and 4-story stacked flats. And then the other option was a little bit higher density. It was just the mix of the high-density residential 2 and 3 with 3- to 4-story stacked flats, and then the question about the county. And so really the difference about housing is the more housing there's there, the more opportunity we have for affordable housing, and some of that meeting the an affordable housing program or project within those options. And I can bounce back to these once we have the discussion too. Options in the area, it's about how to best address affordable housing goals in some of the other areas that are just on the surrounding the hospital redevelopment site. So we've been asking about the neighborhood center, and again, clarifying, and Corey just asked too, because we had a lot of questions from community members like, we don't want the retail center to go away, and of course not, we don't. It's a highly valuable neighborhood center as depicted in our comp plan, but our comp plan also gives us direction for all of our neighborhood centers throughout town that are single-use retail with a lot of parking, to be evaluating those over time for opportunities for mixed use and opportunities to add housing. The south of Alpine, so just south of the hospital redevelopment site, some opportunities. Some of that is currently housing that we would encourage to stay, and some of it is non-residential uses that we want to just evaluate as to how those might evolve over time. And then along Broadway, especially south of North Street. Okay, trying harder to get closer to the microphone. Sorry about that. It's just right there. Some of that area is mixed use, and some of it is some commercial uses with quite a bit of parking around that. And also heard a lot from community members as those are opportunities for places that might be good opportunities for mixed use or housing over time. And then, as I mentioned, if the board would like to discuss prioritizing any of the hard to meet needs or the types of affordable housing that we would be seeking, really more on the site, because we know that redevelopment of private property in the area over time would likely be meeting the affordable housing through the inclusionary housing program, either by 20%, 25% on site, or through the cash and loan. And so next steps, as I mentioned, we will be recording and documenting the feedback from the board to be able to share with our planning board and council. So, and David, also glad that you're here to hear it firsthand. And we'll be informing the staff recommendation. We anticipate the public hearings and feedback from the planning board and council in August, and then tentatively scheduled to turn around for adoption of a final plan in later September and early October. So we're back to our questions, and I'd be happy to answer any questions from the board.
So who has questions? We can just go down the line if everybody has some, or we can bounce around a little bit. Okay, let's bounce around. Terry?
The civic piece, is that just for the county offices?
So no, what we're anticipating is that the city would renovate that medical office pavilion that's at the corner of, so all of the options assume that the city service center would be located at the medical office pavilion. If the county just relocates on the site too, it would be in some configuration, and we're doing some work with the county staff and with some of the consultants to better understand. They have a pretty sizable space need, and so it displaces, we think, somewhere around 100, the potential for around 100 units, plus or minus. So
The civic presence in option D is City of Boulder.
City of Boulder and Boulder County.
And Boulder County.
Yes,
Both.
both.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
Judy?
I have a couple of questions in a couple of areas. The first may not be related to this. Hopefully you can tell me. I heard that in the discussion of the opportunity zones, there was the possibility that ELUs, which I believe means efficiency living units, up until now in many zones, they had been, if a developer wanted to build more than 20%, they had to go to planning board site review. And I understand that in the discussion of opportunity zones, they might eliminate that. And it would, I want to know whether that would affect Alpine Balsam so that a developer could come in and say, no, I want to do 100% ELUs and not have to do a site review for that. They're planning on changing that, is what was discussed in that, so.
So my understanding is that if there were changes to how we treat efficiency living units, or that would only apply to that area where the opportunity zone is. It wouldn't apply citywide.
Great. Okay, thank you. Then my other question is about the traffic impact study. As Jean knows, she gave me the copy of the traffic impact study to read and to study, and when I got home, I saw that it only went to page 28 when there were 52 pages, and then I looked on the city council packet, what they got, and they only got up to page 28, and then Jean referred me to another site that again was just 28 pages, and I'm happy to hear that some of you have seen the full traffic study, but I want to know if we and council and planning board and easily accessible to the public can get the whole traffic study.
The full traffic study is now on the website. There are a few hundred more pages than the initial. Typically, we share with the decision makers and the community the meat of the report and then the summary of the key findings, and then all of the charts and all of the engineering and all of the analysis. We typically don't. So it's hundreds of pages. But it is available on the website for folks that want to view that now.
So could you tell me specifically where? Because I went right before I came here today to the link you gave me, and it was still the
resources?
28-page one. So
Okay.
that might be something.
When I looked yesterday, it was the longer one. So I will confirm, but we have asked our communication staff to put the longer one up there.
Great, thank you. That's all.
Jacques?
Jean, question for you, just first to go back to the traffic study, because there was another point of kind of clarification on it, I think, that I've been hearing about from community members. The draft status that was on it, is it a final status now? Because that was throwing a lot of people there saying, oh, this is just a draft, so we don't really know what's going on.
Well, it's the analysis that we have to date. And I think one of the speakers mentioned, these things take a while, so we had to provide a certain range of assumptions for them to test. At the moment, we are not anticipating having that redone. The options that we have on the table are still within those earlier assumptions. They're going to change. They're probably going to change a little bit once we finalize a recommendation, and we can evaluate at that time if we, and especially with direction on the draft plan, if there's a need, if the projections come out very different from what we have had studied, we might have the consultants take another look at that, but we don't have that in the scope at the moment.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to get a little understanding of clarity on that. The other question, I think, follows on one that Terry had about the county's offices. If they were to bring county services to the site, it would displace a certain amount of square footage that we would have available for, let's say, residential. Do we have any sense at this point? I know we very well may not, but I just want to check in on kind of like the trade-offs that we're looking at for that at Iris.
And they're not certain yet. What we're finding is that, as I mentioned, it certainly displaces at least about 90 to 100 units, or the space for that. It would have implications about the parking. I mean, we have an approach that we had tested around the general improvement district with reduced parking, shared parking for both the city service uses and the housing, especially because there's a potential for more sharing because of the day-night aspect of that. We've had direction all along for not constructing more parking on the site, and so we're not entirely sure how that would work if the county's there as well. It would, if the city and the county can share the existing parking structure, that still means that there would have to be probably some additional parking for the housing that would still be there. So not clear yet. All of these things are things that we would have to continue to study, assess, and address as we move forward. Does that help?
Last question. Yeah, did you? Yeah, one more. The other one, last one I have for you is on, you just made a mention of the mixed use in the kind of other
Nearby
areas of the area plan, not just, at the site. And so is that, just to be clear on that also for myself, basically we're saying if we can get some mixed use there, we're bringing some housing in with some retail or commercial of some sort, whatever that is, and it essentially is going to improve our walkability capabilities in the neighborhood? Is that the reason for that?
Well, there's some of that. I mean, there are a lot of opportunities in the area, in places where we have big parking lots, buildings that are very set back. When we can define some of the mixed-use types over time, can be brought up a little closer, have a better sidewalk, street feel, better pedestrian environment. So much of this area had been developed prior to any of our current landscaping standards or any of that. So we do see a lot of opportunities over time for improving the pedestrian environment, the look and feel and the character, and some of the tree canopy, et cetera.
You brought up a question, Jack, about parking, and I was curious, in each of these scenarios, what the parking impacts look like for the neighborhood. Because I know that was an issue that I've been hearing from people that live in that area. They're concerned about overflow parking from a lot of development, either whether it's mixed use or housing, that was an issue. People who've lived there a long time, that was an issue when it was a hospital. There was overflow parking into the streets in the neighborhood. People couldn't park in front of their homes. And what does the parking look like in each of these scenarios? And how will it affect the local neighbors?
So our direction has been to apply this advanced mobility strategy, so a strategy about reduced parking requirements, more shared parking, and also to utilize it's an approach that we use successfully in Boulder Junction and in the downtown, based on parking utilization data for those types of residential uses and the mixed uses that we have in those places. As I mentioned, the parking is shared, unbundled, managed, and paid. So along with that is it's a general improvement district, so funded through property taxes and through the district, and thinking the district would start with just the site redevelopment. To fund the parking management, but also to fund the programs that go with that, to help encourage and to support that reduced amount of parking. We also know, and we have heard, that there is the concern about the overflow into the neighborhood. So we included in the strategies and the recommended approach, it would be to proactively start a neighborhood park, something like the neighborhood parking permit program, to make sure that we're managing the parking in the nearby areas to minimize that impact to the neighborhood.
In each of the scenarios?
Yes, yeah, it's overall.
And then can you provide an update on the flood situation there? Because I know one of the original goals of this site was to move the city offices out of a high hazard flood zone into, in an expiring building, into a more suitable location. And I know that there's
Noted.
Okay, we're good. Okay, better? There we go.
We can switch to main mics now as well.
You can shut off the portable, except for Judy. If you want to mute your back mic. Okay, flood mitigation. As I mentioned, we've spent a lot of time studying what the potential options might be to improve, to address more of the 100-year flood in the area. We studied groundwater, and we were considering potential mitigation in North Boulder Park. What we found is that the groundwater in North Boulder Park is like that far from the surface. And so, like right there, that's the technical term. And so digging down to be able to create some of that detention is not going to be feasible. We went into that study thinking, the criteria of working with it to further assess those options would be that it has to stay a great park. And I mean, it's a wonderful park, and we have to maintain the uses that are there, maintain the trees, and not adversely impact it. And so what we found is without being able to go down, you have to go up, and to be able to get a sufficient amount of detention to make a project worthwhile, to at least address like half of the potential 100-year floods, it would require more of a berm than our staff thought was within that criteria of acceptable. So without being able to do more at North Boulder Park, it will mean that we have to address the 100-year flood on the site. We're not going to be able to address a wider impact, but we can't make things worse, and we have to address the flood footprint on the site. So with the deconstruction and some grading, we'll be able to adjust that 100-year flood area to a conveyance area at the north part of the site, but it still is going to take up a pretty significant amount of space because it's going to be not in a culvert. We've had the direction to have the flood mitigation be above ground, so it'll be a landscaped, designed conveyance zone. It will mean that there'll be a sizable setback from Balsam. We're trying to assess if we keep the existing trees or how those are incorporated in that kind of design. At this point, at the area plan process, we're still pretty high level. We're not doing the very specific design for that. So it'll be, we're estimating at this point the most conservative is about 100-foot conveyance area. So it may impact some of the projections for housing and for developable land that we have at this point by bringing those down just a little bit. But that's the approach that we'll be including in the area plan for the recommendation for flood mitigation. Does that answer the question?
Can we go back to the schedule slide? Is that easy to do? Yep. Okay. So the the planning board, city council is October 1st. Okay. Are these dates pretty firm at this point? I hadn't seen all of these.
As firm as our dates ever get.
As they can be, okay. I'm just planning around some extensive travel. Let's see, and the other question I had, is there any thought of going to TAB for their...
We did.
Oh, you did already? Okay, I missed that.
We did. We
okay.
checked. We've been providing updates to TAB various times throughout the project.
Okay. So they've
and we
already
provided all of the recommended approach to them at their last meeting. They were supportive and interested in hearing more of the community feedback, but supportive of this approach.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Danny?
I'm trying to get up to speed, so my apologies if I'm reinventing the wheel at all. But as I understand it, this option D is the one that would encompass, that's the only one out of these four that would encompass both city and possibly county facilities on the site. So I guess my question kind of, with some interest on the notion of bringing the county in and then having that option on Iris and Broadway is, would the concept be that land where the facilities are right now on the corner of Iris and Broadway would be dedicated over to the city, or is it just still really up in the air? It really depends on.
Very up in the air. There are a lot of factors. So, at a high level, thinking that the 17 acres that the county has is a lot more space for housing than the potential for the couple acres trade that they need at Alpine.
Right.
But I think 7 of those are the ball fields. There are a couple of structures that are over 50 years old, some with significant historic value. There's some flood implications up there too. And of course, we'd have to talk about appropriate density and developability and compatibility with the neighborhood. So many factors
Right.
to still understand.
Traffic study didn't encompass any of that either, so that would be another.
Not for Iris.
Okay. Okay, well, that's all I have for now.
Anybody else? I had one, just process. So what's driving the timeline here? So what is, why are we trying to move at this pace?
We are aiming to get an area plan adopted this fall.
And who wanted that?
Our city council.
City council wanted that. Okay. Have they given any further feedback as to that timeline since their initial?
We have, the last check-in from City Council Agenda Committee on Monday was that they're anticipating this discussion on August 27th.
Great. Okay. Any other questions? Otherwise, we're going to go to the rest of public comment real quick. Perfect. Karen Simmons. Thank you for your patience.
Well, thank you, and thank you, Jean, for that full traffic report. I am digging into it. You received my comments earlier this afternoon about that traffic report. I have real questions about whether it's viable, and to hear your comments that there may be some additional changes. We'll see. I would like to make a statement about the parking. I used to live on the hill, and neighborhood parking eventually made it out to our house on 9th Street, and we could no longer park in front of our house. I have real questions about neighborhood parking, especially if you're going to tax us for it. But this concept that I want you to think about is, I was sitting at Breadworks this afternoon looking at our wonderful mountains and thinking, in a couple years, I might not be able to see those anymore. That is a shopping center parking lot. What do they have at shopping centers? What do they have at grocery stores? They have shopping carts. Why do they have carts? Because people need enough food to feed their families until they can get back to the grocery store again. The plans that you guys are working with are making the assumption that I can ride my bicycle over to the grocery store, get some groceries, and go home. I'm certainly not going to be able to afford to use an Uber once a week to go to the grocery store. I can't schlep onto a bus 2 or 3 or 4 bags of groceries. We need to make sure that that shopping center parking lot is maintained. And I know, it's already being used for people who use the bus to go downtown and stuff like that. But if you're going to tax people, either the shopping center itself, so Ideal or Breadworks or whoever it is, to park in that lot, which is kind of what some of those words in that traffic report say, if you're going to charge the retail to park there, and then you're going to charge the customer to have a parking permit to go there, you're stepping too far away from what people were going to need to do to go to the grocery store. I want you to think about that. You know, a parking plan is a neighborhood thing, but it's also a retail thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Any other comments? Perfect. We're going to close public comment on this matter.
Adam, if I could just address really quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
The approach for the general improvement district and the park as a parking district at first would not be expanded. The anticipation, I'm sorry, I'm stumbling over all this. The initial boundary for the parking district would just be the redevelopment site, what the city owns. And then we would be exploring the potential expansion of that with property owners with redevelopment over time, but not at first.
All right, we're going to go into board discussion. And I suppose we can pop around if anyone wants to start us off. Yeah, Terry.
Okay. This is almost personal to me because I was actually born in this hospital many, many years ago. So to watch it turn from a hospital to housing and other things is it's exciting. With respect to impacts on the neighborhood, I haven't studied the traffic study yet, but I have to believe that any of these options are less impactful than a full-service, fully operational hospital was for so many years. And I don't know that for sure, but just common sense tells me that no matter what of these choices happen and get built, it's going to be less impactful on the neighborhood than the hospital that was there before. Looking in what I think should be there from just a walking around and driving around the area, common sense perspective, I think you need vertical mixed use along Broadway. I like the idea of consolidating the county and city services in the office medical pavilion, and I think there should be housing of all types pretty much everywhere else. So when I look at the choices that are here, I think that's kind of a combination of A and D. So emphasize housing with a civic presence. I like the idea of all the civic offices being in one place or mostly in one place. It makes it easier for people needing services. It makes it easier for people who work in the city to be in close proximity. I think that's a very good thing. And the mixed use piece, I think a lot of times when people think of mixed use, they think, office over retail or residential over retail. And let's not forget that that's kind of vertical mixed use, whereas horizontal mixed use is in an area plan like this, you have housing on one side of the street and office on the other side of the street. And I think by having largely housing with a civic component, you do have mixed use. It's just horizontal mixed use. They're just next to each other versus stacked on top of each other. So in summary, I like A with a little slice of D, and I think it's very exciting that this is happening. And I like the schedule as well. I like it happening quickly.
Terry, I'll just clarify that the medical office pavilion would be just city uses. The county would need to build a whole nother building because they've got a pretty substantial need, so.
Sure, but it's still all there.
Yeah.
Jay, can we pull up the questions that you're asking again? That was the hope. He kind of went straight into feedback. So. And I'll take the opportunity just to say that we're not making a formal recommendation to council tonight, just so everyone knows. This is sort of a getting to know what everyone's feeling so we can work our way towards, hopefully, a recommendation that's going to bring most of the board together. So that's just where we're at right now. This is a get your feelings out on the table.
Sorry, and just to clarify, so the idea would you do that at your August meeting?
That's the intent. Okay, next up. Oh, yeah, Judy?
Yeah, go ahead. You go.
Okay, I'll go. So there's just a whole lot of unknowns here to me. We don't know, how much land we would get if we did the trade-off for Iris. That is something that really interests me a lot, just to sort of spread the housing out even more in a way. So I'm interested in just knowing more about that in general. And if we could get that before having to make a recommendation, that would be great. Obviously, I realize the timeline is constricted, but knowing what all of our options actually are before we have to make a recommendation would really be ideal in my mind. That's my only piece right now. I might jump back in a little bit, but I really want to know more about that option in general. Yeah, Chuck?
At least to jump in the discussion mode right now. One piece that Terry brought up about the civic uses there. I have some questions about the civic uses there from the standpoint of both location, in that is that really the best space to be from a transportation perspective, and accessibility for the whole city, because I feel like our center has shifted somewhat. And that in combination with the $60 million cost for a remodel on that building seems to be, those two things together, when I take them in, I'm like, are we really getting what it's worth there? Now, I go back and forth on it myself. I've talked to other people who've been in this town for a long time, and I've been here almost 40 years now, but others have been here even longer. And there is a sense of, it's kind of where our civic space should be for some reason, kind of historically, energetically, almost emotionally. So I get the difficulty of that discussion. But again, functionally, I wonder if location isn't better elsewhere. And then I do have to just question the cost of some $60 million, which I think is what Michelle shared on that. I think it was at a council meeting.
Yes, and I will encourage, we're going to have the combined discussion of the, at least a piece of the facilities master planning work that'll tee up the conversation with the area plan with the council on the 27th. So Michelle and her team will be addressing a lot of the points that you're making.
Cool, great.
Judy?
Okay, fasten your seatbelts. First of all, I just wanted to remind all of us, and I'm not sure if Jay and Jean know this, but anytime HAB gives either feedback or recommendations, we already voted on a whole year ago that we want to see how we're being represented first before that feedback goes out. And it doesn't require a meeting, but it does require emailing it out to us and us seeing it. And I don't know if you knew that, but that's what's been done since we made that decision, since we voted on that. So secondly, I will be specifically addressing your questions, but I have a few other comments to make first. And part of them are my own feelings, and part of them I got from talking to other people at the sessions that you had, Jean, and from reading all the emails, and then some are just my own opinions. In the emails and with the people I talked to at your event, there were certainly a few people at the event who didn't have any position one way or another. They just wanted certain things, like they wanted senior housing or something specific like that, and didn't really voice anything about the choices. If you could pick, can you put up the at a glance thing or something? Because I'll be talking about that in a minute. Yeah, thanks. I'll get to that in a minute. So my first opinion that is very strong for me. I live really close to the Iris Broadway land, and I think that has wonderful opportunities for housing as well, as you mentioned. I think it's really premature to be making the decision about Alpine Balsam until that is decided. I think it influences too many decisions along the way. And I just think that's imperative that that be figured out first. I want to mention that the vision plan includes, your vision plan that I got from the website includes strengthening the neighborhood fabric and also aligns what is already great about the neighborhood. I also recognize that the council and staff are very interested in public engagement and have made a lot of efforts. And it seems that the neighbors have spoken. To me, it doesn't seem like there's mixed opinion from residents about this. It seems like it's running at about 4 to 1. Maybe that's just how I counted the emails and when I talked to people at the events. But there's been, it seems that the neighborhood survey of 500 people has been discounted as not being valid. And if people don't think it's valid, then I would suggest that the city do its own survey and have people who are on different sides of the density issue give you feedback that it's completely neutral, and just get that survey out there from everyone. As far as traffic, a few years ago, for my own neighborhood issue, I had somebody in my neighborhood who was an engineer teach me how to read those, and it actually I required his help. And I realized that there are two important elements in studying a traffic study, and the first one is the baseline, how the baseline was derived at. And already I heard something today that there was only 1 hour of study done of impact times rather than the 2 hours. I live on Broadway, so I know how long the heavy traffic goes, and 1 hour actually isn't sufficient. So I want to know exactly how it was done and what those numbers were so I can see them myself. The other element that's also important is I know there's a manual that's used called the Transportation Engineers ITE Trip Generation Manual that's used as the basis for making projections. I want to actually see what those projections were and how they derived at those numbers. And that takes a lot of studying. So I think to be making decisions about, the traffic will be fine, is premature at this point until people have had a chance to really study it. As far as parking, I live in a place where there are 10 condos. We each have one assigned space, and there are 12 other open spaces. I think that if each of us right now think about what our parking situation is, many people in Boulder and many people on council and on different boards choose not to use their car, or in some to even have a car. But I'd like each of us to think, do we have a parking space? Do we have a garage? Do we have a carport? And there's something that just doesn't sound right and democratic to me about telling people, oh yes, you can live here, but you can have 0.8 tenths of a car. That's just, I just am uncomfortable about that. I also feel that people are going to keep their cars for the most part, and that's just the way it is. So they will park wherever they can, walking blocks and blocks if they have to, and clogging up adjacent neighborhoods. Another unintended consequence is thinking, I shop in the Ideal area really a lot, and I was thinking, what will happen to Ideal, because people who can't find parking will of course park there. So what's going to happen to that whole plaza is there's going to have to be guards there, parking guards all the time, hounding people, are you shopping here? What are you doing here? What are you this? What are you that? And it's going to become unpleasant and lose some of what's so special about it right now. Also, I want to mention that a couple years ago when I was studying our neighborhood issues, I called a real estate developer in Denver, and I called a contractor, successful contractor in Atlanta, who, to ask them questions about how to evaluate how much a property costs to build. And unsolicited, they both said to me, and they don't know each other, they both said to me, yeah, well, the strange thing about development these days is that the trend is to reduce parking. And the problem with that is it doesn't work. Everyone just drives around and is angry and upset, and it causes more problems than it solves, and it doesn't take away people's cars. So I think we have to decide if we want to look like Capitol Hill in Denver, or if we want to retain our neighborhoods. The community hospital certainly had more people in and out per day than I would imagine would be generated by at least some of the options. However, those people did not come and go at peak hours. They came in and out throughout the day, and there were vast amounts of parking spaces there. So I don't think it's comparable to say, oh, this won't be any more than it was with community hospital. I just don't think it, I think it's apples to oranges. So then also I wanted to mention engagement very briefly. I have several ideas that I won't take more time talking about now, but if you want to talk about ideas to tweak the engagement process a little more, I'd be happy to talk to you about them. Kalani on your staff suggested that the best way to proceed might be for us to pick an option and tweak it as we wanted, rather than make up a whole new thing. So I spent some time doing that. So the option I like best for the site is A, with some changes, combined with C for the area plan. But for A, if you look at it, see the little black part that's the highest density up there for A? I think, for me, that would be fine to leave that black square or rectangle as it is and have that be a space for a LIHTC tax credit place where you could have 50 or 60 units of permanently affordable housing. However, I would change all the rest to the lowest density, and I would do a new one. I would do MXR land use and MXR2 zoning, which would be 10 market-priced houses, units, with 10 permanently affordable units. And that's how 3303 Broadway, the People's Clinic, currently sits right now. And I would also, I don't care if the city has their offices there or up on Iris, if it ends up being that way, or the county, either way, but I don't think it needs to be both. I don't think they have enough crossover to make that key. I think there should be one at one place and one at the other. I'm just going to briefly now demonstrate a little bit about what my idea offers, because I believe my idea offers way more affordable housing and doesn't as negatively impact the neighborhood character as this. So the first one, A, currently has 260 units per acre as a top site. Since you don't know how many acres quite it would be, I used 4.5 acres or 5.8 acres. So you could either have 57 units or 45 units per acre, which is pretty dense. That would still only be 23% guaranteed permanently affordable, or 60 permanently guaranteed affordable in the LIHTC area. With my way, you would have only 28 units per acre, or 26, depending on what you did. You would have 66% permanently affordable, with 95 permanently affordable units, or as much as 108, depending on how many you built, 108 permanent. And I can show you that math if you like, or I can go over it easily. There'd be 130 units that way. The others, I'll just briefly mention, their density could be as high as 66 units per acre, it could go as high as 66 units per acre. And I wanted to mention in comparison, because I think we have to try and actually visualize what that's like. In Boulder Junction, one of the areas, Pearl Parkway, is 73 units per acre, so that's not too far away from 66 per acre. Holiday, and so imagine where Boulder Junction is. That's in the midst of a more retail, totally retail area, not a very residential neighborhood area. Holiday, which is right on Broadway, is only 12 to 20 units per acre. Foothills Community, which is west on Violet, west of Broadway on Violet, has about 25 units per acre. And so we have to think about really what that would look like there. The difference between, do you really want that neighborhood to look more like Boulder Junction, right in a residential neighborhood, or do you want it to look more like Foothills or Holiday? So I also want to mention that my idea works for people who want the most affordability, the most affordable housing, way more affordable housing, and also doesn't mess with the neighborhood. So as far as your particular question, so I go for option A, but with very specific tweaks. I go for option C for the area plan. For Broadway and Iris, I'm looking to hear more, but again, I don't think a decision should be made until that's settled. And as far as hard-to-serve housing issues, I think this area would, with my idea, lend itself well to LIHTC for some, with some good, solid, and that's some density right there. But the rest of it could be the market rate, and then the others permanently affordable could be the middle-income ownership. So those would be the ones I go for. And then the last thing I just wanted to mention is that I'm planning on talking about our actual feedback, or if we can come up with recommendations more in our August meeting. Thanks.
Any questions about any of that?
I think so, Judy, but I think maybe we can just share some of your ideas and the calculations so that I can better understand what that means.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? I realize that's a tough act to follow, but yeah, just a continued board discussion here. You don't have to give feedback right away, but I'd like to, at the end of this, get a read where everyone kind of is right now, even with the unanswered questions, just so we can work towards something at the next meeting without having to have a whole nother discussion about it, so. Yeah, Danny.
Okay, I'm using this mic, right? Okay, so I share Terry's perspective that I think some confluence of A and D really would seem to work here. I'd be very intrigued by the notion of having county facilities over here and utilizing that Iris and Broadway space as a way to possibly diffuse some of the issues that we're talking about. I don't know that you really need to wait for that to happen. From my experience, that could take 6 months to 6 years to 60 years, right? So, but I think that the whole notion of a comp plan is to try to keep things as flexible as possible so that you can have those contingencies or those possibilities in place and articulate them in the plan now. And I would like to see that whatever plan goes forward has some of that flexibility to address that, and really, to address a lot of the other possibilities here as well. But to say this is our focus, but there are other things that may change, and we're flexible and we can adapt if we need to. I will share my concerns with parking. Just to start with, when there is inadequate parking, that does actually contribute to the congestion, because what you have happen is people are going around. I've seen it time and time again. Spent 20 years dealing with resort development, and anybody that's gone to a ski resort on a busy time of year, you can pull your hair out, and whatever hair I have left, I've pulled out. And so I would say that I think parking is something that really needs to be addressed a little more deeply, and the problem is none of us want to, because it's the just the blank space over there, and you never want to build a stadium for Super Bowl Sunday. However, once you don't plan for it, it's so hard to come back and get it, and it really does have an impact on the community. I think it does have an impact on people's perception of how a new development comes in and blends in with the existing community, and I think that's something that I really be concerned about. That's one of the reasons why I'm pretty interested in the possibilities up on Iris and Broadway, because that area being larger and that area having some more potential to deal with things like parking, it might be a way to diffuse it, and that's one of the things that I'd be interested in looking at. But I do think the whole notion of emphasizing housing, because this is a very good opportunity to introduce housing to an area that certainly it blends in with the local community, and there's a lot of ways that you can do it. I like some of the ideas that were brought up here, and I think there's a lot of different possibilities. And I think some of the concepts that I saw with like the stacked flats, I think those work really well, especially if you're going to have different levels of housing and different levels of affordability. Sometimes those stacked flats can work really well because you can have bi-level, single level on top of them, et cetera. So there's a lot of possibilities there to essentially integrate the different models of housing, from market-based to even the light deck housing. But I do think that ultimately parking is something where the other part of this is that if we have somewhat of a D model, I think that the concept that there can be this balance of the parking for residential, which maybe is there more at night, and the parking for the civic, which is maybe there more in the day, becomes a lot more viable than the supermarket. And growing up, I was born in New York City, growing up in that area, what I can say is a lot of people there don't drive, but a lot of people there have cars. And so, my experience from Boulder and from most of the state of Colorado is people may be walking more, they may take the bus, and we want to encourage that, but most people still do have a car because there's no other way to get to the mountains, there's no other way to get to a lot of other areas. And so I think just the very notion of saying, how do we contemplate that and how do we figure it out? And from the sounds of it, there's not really an option to go underneath or anything like that, but really trying to figure out any way to get the spaces that can get a little bit above and kind of pragmatically deal with what we might anticipate there, I think would be great. And one of the things that I thought of is if there's 100-foot or more setback on Balsam because of flood issues, it's possible to have some flood mitigation areas that can also be utilized as parking. If we're talking about a 100-year flood, the one thing fortunately is it doesn't happen all the time, hopefully, right? And so I've seen that before. It can be challenging, but that's even one of the things where maybe that's an opportunity to introduce a little bit more parking. But overall, I think there's a lot of potential in this area. I think it's a very exciting concept, and I really think that emphasizing housing, because it's an opportunity for that doesn't come every day, and mixing that with the potential for civic presence is probably a good approach.
Juliet?
Thanks, everybody, for all the feedback here. This makes my job easier. So a couple things. One, there's been a lot of emails that have come through HAB, a lot of people with comments in the last couple of months, and I want to just make sure we acknowledge all of the feedback that we've gotten from the community. I know there was an email that came through today about a group that did a neighborhood survey and is feeling quite a bit ignored. I think you referenced that neighborhood survey of over 530-something people, 75% of which expressed a preference for a lower density option that was removed from these panel of choices. So I want to make sure we acknowledge that group, and that group is neighbors. It's not the whole city. I don't think they represent the voice of the whole city, but they are immediately impacted by any development because they live in that area. So I know that group has said that they are not opposed to affordable housing. In fact, they would like to see affordable housing on that site, but they would also like to see a development that's in line with the goals of the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan and preserving the neighborhood character while achieving the other goals of the city. So I think we need to make sure, and I actually like Judy's comment about how to, can we take choice A, if those are our four choices that we're now left with, can we take that and tweak it to, and come up with some kind of good compromise that is going to incorporate the desires of some of the neighbors in that area that are directly impacted because of the other issues that they're going to face, such as parking and traffic. So I think that's an important consideration. I think in terms of the housing affordability, we need to ask ourselves, for that location, what population do we really want to serve from an affordable housing standpoint? Do we want to serve families? Do we want to serve singles? Do we want to serve seniors? I think we need to come up with some ideas about what type of affordable housing makes sense, and then how do we make that work? I know that having been a resident of the Holiday neighborhood in the past for 8 years myself, that's a very successful example of a mix of affordable and market rate housing with a density that seems to work for everyone. Although I will submit that there's parking problems up there because there's not enough street parking, and there's always a fight for parking your car, because I was there, fighting for parking my car. And it's impractical to think that everybody is not going to have a car, because, to Danny's point, we do go to the mountains. Some of us drive to Costco for groceries, and we need a car. Until we have better transportation, which is my other point, and I think that is inextricably tied to this concept of developing this area, is we need better public transportation. And I understand Lyft and Uber are very successful, but that does not, and an option that a lot of people use, but that does not remove cars. It does not remove emissions until they are 100% renewable source vehicles. So I don't like the idea of using those as transportation options for consideration. That's not a mass transit solution. And then in terms of these designs, no one's talked about height. I don't think there's a lot of appetite here in the city for over 35 feet. People live in Boulder because they want to escape the big city. I know a lot of us here have lived in big cities before, and we choose not to live there because we don't want to be in that environment, the density, the height. We want a little bit more open space, and that's the fiber of this Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan, is to preserve those things. So I would not support any option that was going to be looking at a lot of, I know that there's some area right now over 35 feet because of the existing hospital, but I would not support a land use that would promote a lot of over 35 feet height limit. That's all I got.
I'm going to go again real quick. Some things that have kind of struck me throughout this entire process is we don't hear a whole lot about the number of people who are going to be there or anything along those lines. It's all about the sort of secondary impacts. So it seems like most people have parking issues, traffic issues, height issues. So if we can find ways to address that, we barely talked about housing tonight. You know, we're the Housing Advisory Board, but it seems like we're spending all our time on the impacts, not the housing itself. So I get that. I understand why. That's where the, sort of the reservations come from for the neighborhood. And, I think just my recommendation right now is to try to address those as the main issues right now, because it doesn't seem like the people themselves are the issue. It's all the things that the people create. So one thing that I think we've been missing is that sort of like 3D visualization from the ground of what each individual option would look like, so that people could, not saying we have to put on goggles and walk around the thing, but some pictures of what it would look like from the ground level would probably be beneficial to sort of, get rid of any height concerns. Even, showing some visualizations of what traffic is like now and what it might be like based on the traffic impact plans. We could do sped up video of that during the rush hour times, showing what the parking looks like now and what it might look like based on any individual plan. Those types of things where we actually would indicate what the impacts would be physically, so people can see them in their minds before we have to make decisions about them. Right now, it's just kind of like we do our best to think about it and visualize it, but we don't really have any physical concept of how it's going to work. So that's sort of what I think would allay most of the fears of putting any type of housing. I would really like to talk more about, what types of housing we want to see there, personally. Yeah. Next up, yeah.
I have another go ahead.
Jacques.
I guess a couple of things that, am I on there? Not quite, I'll lean in. A couple of things that I was just listening to Adam, and I'll kind of talk about that first from a discussion standpoint. It's a really difficult process, this one, of trying to do this high-level planning and also trying to have the picture of what this is going to look like. One of my thoughts on this is that in some ways, none of these are terribly far from each other. And I think we would be better served in this entire process to let go of that desire for staff to mock up what it might look like. This is the level of project that, and no disrespect to staff at all, Gene, but in my mind, we need to put broad parameters on that are acceptable ranges, and then we need to see through professional design competition what we can get for that. If we put out our desires as a community, then we can see who can give us the best result, because otherwise we end up with beige. We end up in the middle, and it's not going to be pleasing to anybody. And it's unfortunate, I think, how we end up with a lot of projects. So just a little bit of a different perspective of how to maybe come up with a result at the end of the day where Judy's numbers or my numbers for affordable housing units and housing units there overall aren't the driving factor. The driving factor is the quality of the development at the end of the day. So anyway, that's one of the pieces that would be feedback from me to council, which is maybe a slightly different look at how we're doing it. I know it's hard politically to do that, but good planning, good civic results require a little bit of boldness at times. So that's one piece. Another one that I really want to step into is the concept of the neighborhood and neighborhood character. It's one, as you all know, always gets to me a little bit. I had a response to one of our past board members' letters to council, which just went to him, but if you look at the BVCP, there are 11 references to neighborhood, not all of those to neighborhood character throughout the entire document. There are 179 references to our other values. Sustainability itself has 72. Climate change, diversity, inclusivity are significant pieces. And our focus, I think, needs to be balanced. This piece of property is publicly zoned, talking about the site, as was the Mapleton Hospital. My question is, are we getting the greatest community benefit for the entire community while still being sincerely concerned with the impacts in the neighborhood? And I think it's important looking forward to keep those things in mind, to also think of a future as much as, if not more than, a present and a past. The transportation thing, there are changes coming, we know that. What they'll be, we don't know yet. But all housing is developed to meet a market. Why don't we develop housing here whose market is people who don't want cars? We do that with every development we ever make. Let's do that here. Let's push towards what we're professing in the other pages of the BVCP. That's it.
So I respectfully disagree with that, because if you're really wanting to do as much affordable housing as possible, you're putting a big burden on people who are often working jobs at odd hours and often don't have the same options for affording Lyft and Uber if they have to get somewhere, and or paying $100 a month for a parking place if it's bundled or whatever that word is, unbundled, whatever, unbundled. And I also want to point out, I didn't count. I'm very impressed that you counted all the references in the Boulder Valley Comp Plan, or somebody told them to you. But in the survey that was done prior to the finalization of the Boulder Valley Comp Plan, they did a survey of actual people that was a very statistically valid survey. And the two most important things to the actual people who live in Boulder are two things: affordability and neighborhood character. And they were 1 percentage point ahead, and they were the top two. So I believe that neighborhood character is hugely important, and I believe, as I outlined in my little ditty that might have been too hard to follow, but I believe there is a way. You know, I'm into the finding that sweet spot in the middle is my whole thing, and I believe there is a way to get maximum affordable housing, permanently affordable housing, and not mess with the neighborhood character. And then you've got a win-win situation, and win for the community as well.
Could I just ask Judy, those over here, as ex officio, on the affordability numbers, a lot of the ability to fund the affordability development depends on how you can have some market rate development with either cash in lieu, or whether the particular private developer is putting on-site affordable, or whether they're paying into the housing partners funding and things like that. Did you look at that? Because I know a lot of that stuff kind of happens behind the scenes. I know Kurt's probably got spreadsheets and spreadsheets on how we can get the numbers, how we can get to those numbers. So I'm not sure if did you take that into account?
So I did somewhat. I based some of it on 1440 Pine, which is a standalone LIHTC project. Okay. They didn't have to have 4 times the amount of other housing to count it. It's a standalone project, and the city did have to kick in some money for it, but the tax incentive people put in something like 12, and the city put in 1 or 2 or something like that. So that's that. For the MXR2, where you have 10 market rate and 10 affordable, permanently affordable, the market rate for the developer would help off-balance the permanently affordable, and their deal would be they would deed the 10 permanently affordable for, and the only reason I know more about that is because we went through lots of discussions about that in my neighborhood and with planning staff about that. So that's how I imagined it would be affordable and possible. I don't know. I'm not a contractor or engineer or expert city planner, but it still seems in the realm of doable.
If you took it into account, I'm sure Kurt and his staff could take that to the next step. So, okay, thank you.
Sir. Adam, do you think it might be helpful for staff, for us to take a straw poll of if we had to pick A, B, C, or D? Right now, I know we're going to talk about it again next month, but just maybe to say, hey, if I had to pick one of these, it would be A or D. Do you think that makes sense?
Yeah, I was hoping to do that.
Direct feedback?
Towards the end,
okay,
for sure.
I'm sorry.
No, I thought it was important to get everyone's nuance
that's
before we gave because as Jacques said, maybe it isn't about picking a specific one, so I want to make sure that thing is on the table.
You can have E, none of the above.
Yeah. And that actually brings up a great question. And this is a question that I have heard is, if we weren't to do anything and this just remained public land and then the city had to sell it off, we don't know what the possibilities are on this particular parcel, right? So, yeah.
So as you said, it is currently, that's a land use designation of public and a zoning of public, which are quite restrictive. So presumably, for the purposes of a vision of this area, we need to assign land use and then zoning. And that's what this process is trying to set up, so that we can, as Jacques said, have at least one more step toward what we want there, so that we can solicit partners and then get to the more specific site design.
So if the city were to just sell it off, this problem isn't going away necessarily. It's just gonna, yep, okay. Yeah.
Two things on that. I mean, if the city council directed the city, as it looked like they might do at one point this year, to sell it off, I think they would also direct city staff to try to change the zoning before it got sold off. So that would probably happen, and that would create a whole new set of discussions. And then the other thing, I just wanted to kind of really reinforce what Jacques was saying. We will see site reviews, concept reviews and site reviews based on these land use decisions, that we will have the same levers and we can ask and that there be RTD passes for every resident, for example. There's a lot of things that come out at that level that we just don't know that we'll get to here. So there's a lot of stuff that we can do to kind of try to make these proposals match whatever it is that we go with. And I have to say that on planning board and every other place I've been, it looks like there's a lot of people that see hybrids of them and see, good parts, and I'm sure as you go through, you'll pull from the different options. So it doesn't necessarily, it's not clear to me that even I could say which option specifically I like the best, because there's certain aspects of each option that might lend itself to creating a hybrid over the next few weeks, which I think is interesting. And one more thing that I just wanted to say, and I'm sorry, Jay, but we're going to be looking at the ELUs tomorrow, and I do think that the 20% is being pulled from the use tables. So all the zones with efficiency living units will no longer require a use review specifically for that if it's over 20%. I looked at the ordinance while we were sitting here, so that's my understanding on it from what we'll see tomorrow. So, yeah, but and not everybody on planning board is behind that approach, but I think the majority have expressed support for it, and I think the majority of city council also did. So.
Thank you for clarifying that. So that makes me wonder, is it possible to attach that as a restriction to whatever this ends up being, that there would be a site review for if somebody wanted 100% ELUs, that there would have, or is there going to be a site review no matter what anyway?
David, you may know better on this, but I think that by the size of the parcels and the size of the development, it would automatically require a site review.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure most of these will require a site review, and yeah, if the 20% is taken out, then we would have to find other criteria-based ways to talk about the mixed use of housing types. I think that most people who have weighed in on it have come down on that 20% is a little bit arbitrary and is limiting possibilities where there might be a market for smaller dwelling units, and we just had one come past us recently. So I think that there was some a reasonable amount of support for removing the 20% rule, because it's just kind of arbitrary at this point, but I know that not everybody agrees.
I guess Sam Weaver would call this a colloquy, right? So my question is, wasn't there a study done about in-commuters, and it showed that what most people want is, they don't care if it's a condo or townhouse or whatever, but if they really had their choice in Boulder, it would be a little condo or townhome with a yard, with a little teeny yard, and that was the biggest interest. Do you guys know that? Not for Alpine Boston specifically, this was, right, but that affects our decision of if we go with all ELUs or what.
That was the Housing Choice Survey of 2013. And that was one of the sort of quotes that was pulled out, but that was kind of a common theme. that a lot of people were looking for more of the yard, and they could get that outside of Boulder. So yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not sure how widespread that was.
An interesting piece on that also, Judy, was, because I did just read that recently to kind of review it, because that came up, I think maybe when we were talking. But the thing that I noticed in there was it wasn't necessarily a yard of their own. It was a outdoor space that either was shared for, yard type or garden or whatever, but there was that desire for outdoor space, was kind of the real gist of that, I think, from my reading of it. But of course, it's America. We all want a yard.
All right, let's try to wrap this up. Let's do the quick straw poll. Obviously, this isn't locking you into anything. We just want to see if we have any kind of similar interests here. So from the end, Juliet?
I would support A with some modifications at this point, reductions specifically.
If I started somewhere, I'd start with B. And yet, as I said, even with my doubts about civic uses and the like, I can see a melange of these four in some way, a mix of the four, and picking a little bit from around.
So I would also start with A with some tweaks, leaving open the opportunity for D if that would actually provide more land space for housing, to help spread it around Boulder a little bit more.
For the site, I would go for A with tweaks. For the area, I would go with C.
As I said earlier, I like A with a little stronger civic presence.
And I also would be inclined to support A with, again, some flexibility to at least contemplate the possibilities of D, should the opportunity present itself, and not leave it off just because you're supporting A, so that, if that comes up, it's certainly something that can provide a lot of benefit.
Okay.
Thank you to the board members. So we specifically, I don't know if any of you had taken a look at some of you saw the survey question, the questionnaire that we had at the events, and there's also on the online Be Heard Boulder. We didn't ask which one do you like. We asked the questions because we knew we had to we're probably doing a mix and match and wanted to understand the qualities of the things that people liked or didn't like.
Thank you so much. Everyone, just remember that we're trying to make it full recommendation of council next time. So, think of how, try to have your wording ready or what you're looking for specifically to try to get in that recommendation that you think we can, for the most part, agree on. Cool? Great. Let's take a 5-minute break real quick and we'll hop back in right after that. 7:45, we're back.
All right, let's get back into it. We're going to go to the East Boulder Subcommunity Plan.
I just roll? Okay. Hello, I'm Kathleen King. I am a senior planner in comprehensive planning. I think I've met some of you, but I see some new faces. We just started this project this year. I think the last time I met with the Housing Advisory Board, we were still talking about the structure of the program, and council hadn't yet selected which subcommunity was going to be the one that we were going to work on. So that happened this past January. Council selected East Boulder, which is great. So this is the first subcommunity planning process that has happened since the North Boulder subcommunity plan that took place in the 90s. We're about 60% through our inventory and analysis phase, and we're coming up on a major community touch point, and I'll talk a little bit about that coming up here. So I'm going to give you sort of an overview on what we've completed so far, where we are in the process, and then present some of our findings that we've done or that we've come upon through the inventory. So some of the deliverables or work products that we've completed so far as part of the East Boulder process are that we have our work plan in place. We have a communications plan for communicating with the public. There's a community engagement plan, project charter. So all of the sort of upfront organizational stuff has been completed. We did a team site tour with planning staff from across the city to learn more about the subcommunity and kind of see the different land uses that are out there. We have a project website, and we've completed a previous plans memo, which studied all the other planning efforts that have gone on in this area over the last maybe 20 years that may have impacts on our work in East Boulder. And then we also completed an inventory and analysis report outline. So that report is something that we're working on right now. In addition to the report, we're also putting together a ArcGIS Pro Map project. So GIS is a mapping and analysis tool that we use. We have new software, and so we're all kind of learning it and testing it, but it has great potential, I think, for our department, because a lot of what we create and the maps and analyses that we produce, for this project, we can host some of that stuff online and use it as a community engagement tool. So there's a learning curve, but it's pretty exciting. And then our next big upcoming deadline is we will go to City Council in September to give an update on some of the inventory work. On the community engagement process, we've been collecting input at a couple of different venues, but I just kind of want to remind people what we've committed to. So the East Boulder Subcommunity Plan is operating in this collaborate space of the engagement spectrum. So that promises the public that we will work together to formulate solutions and incorporate their input to the maximum extent possible. So that's a big promise, a big ask, but we're doing a lot of work and working with the city manager's office community engagement team to come up with, I think, some creative methods and great ways to document this work. Some of the things we've completed so far is we've developed these tenets of community engagement, and I think a lot of you probably saw that in the January memo. We did a kind of a fun activity in February called What Do You Love About East Boulder? We had a series of Valentines out for the week of February 14th, little boxes at different businesses throughout the area, and collected information from folks about what they really love about that area. We participated in What's Up Boulder. We've held a couple of neighborhood office hours throughout the subcommunity at different businesses. We did a walkabout at the 55th and Arapahoe area, sort of around Foothills Medical Campus and Ball Aerospace to gather input about people's sort of experiences walking in that area, and learning about a lot of the challenges of just being a pedestrian over there. We established a working group, so I just came from our third meeting. I'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. And then we've been putting together this East Boulder Subcommunity Plan Engagement Scrapbook. So we're trying to kind of log all of the engagement that we do, the input that we're collecting, and how we're going to use that input in this scrapbook. And that we have sort of a first draft of the capture of all these events, and that'll go online this week. So the East Boulder Working Group, I was just there 2 hours ago. This group is charged with representing diverse stakeholder interests. They are to share information with their communities, and then they work alongside our planning team. We have 21 members and a planning board liaison. And I have to say, it is a really, really great group. It's just everybody's really engaged. They're representing interests from all over. We have residents of neighborhoods to the south, residents of San Lazaro Park, which is actually in the subcommunity, business owners, landowners, and they're all having really great conversations, and it's just, I'm really happy about the group. They're just awesome. So here they are, great folks. So some of the upcoming engagement that we are planning on are a series of who, what, where, why inventory workshops. So we're going to be hosting, I think, around 10 events at different times of day throughout the subcommunity to collect input on different topics. Housing is going to be one of those topics, and so I have some questions for you about that. We're also putting together a series of videos called Subcommunity Stories. So we're working with Channel 8 to kind of document and capture the stories of different people that live and work in the area, and we'll push those out through Channel 8 and then also on a lot of our social media channels to kind of tell the story of an area that maybe people don't visit that often, and then also help us to promote the process. The last thing is we have a contract with Growing Up Boulder to work on some youth engagement activities, and that contract starts next month, so I'll have some more information about that soon. So our subcommunity planning process is broken into these 3 big questions for the community. Who is East Boulder? What do you want to be? And how do we get there? Today we're focusing on how to answer that first question. I'm going to present an update on city staff's work. So for the past few months, we've been working across departments to collect an inventory of existing conditions. Our approach to answering this question uses 2 different types of information. So what we have today is really this data-based inventory. We're not generating new information, but we're collecting and assembling some of the key facts and statistics about East Boulder, mapping that information. And then the second piece of our work will be to collect experience-based information from the community, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. So for the data-based inventory, we use a lot of public information. We have national resources like the census and the American Community Survey to give us some background on the population, demographics, things like that. We use state resources such as CDOT to look at impacts of transportation, traffic, some of the projects that they might be funding in the future that could impact this area. And then the resources that we really dig deep into are both the county and city databases. So that provides information about property ownership, land use, zoning. We have tons of data. So here is East Boulder. If this is the first time you've seen kind of where the area is, it is bound by Foothills Parkway on the west. the airport on the north up to the Independence Road. It wraps around 63rd Street on the east, and then Arapahoe Avenue is the southern boundary. The subcommunity is 1,610 acres. There are 691 parcels, only 466 residents, and then this area employs 16,984 people. So pretty good information, but I'll kind of put that in the context of the whole city for you. So East Boulder's area makes up almost 10% of the subcommunity. We have 10 subcommunities in the city, so kind of makes sense. It's 1/10. The number of parcels, even though we have 10% of the land area, it's only almost 2% of the properties. So, you know, what that really tells us is the parcels out here are very large, and there's fewer property owners than there might be in another part of town. There are 466 residents. The only residential neighborhood within the boundaries of the study area is the San Lazaro Park neighborhood. That makes up 0% of the city's population, and the reason is that neighborhood is actually outside the city limits. They are in the county. But if we were to kind of compare it, it's less than 1% of the population. And then almost 16% of everyone that comes to work in Boulder comes to work in East Boulder. So for the subcommunity plans, really the goal of these plans is to implement citywide goals of the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan. And those goals fall into these 6 focus areas. So I'm gonna kind of take a high-level look at some of the data that we've collected related to these 6 focus areas. And we will start with design quality and placemaking, and I'll kind of finish with the housing topics, since that's your area of interest. So citywide goals related to design quality and placemaking are to ensure that redevelopment and infill deliver buildings and public spaces of high quality design, and that they create pedestrian-oriented neighborhoods. So one of the things that we consider when we're thinking about design character and quality are historic landmarks. A lot of time they help create aesthetic character for a neighborhood. There's only 2 historic landmarks in East Boulder, and they're kind of hidden. There's one in Valmont Park. It's a small white house. It's boarded up right now. And then there's another smaller structure that's in the bike park area. We're working with historic preservation to learn more about some of the stories behind these buildings. But right now they don't have really a major visual impact on some of the broader areas of the subcommunity, but they may have some characteristics that people in the area think are valuable. So we'll study those more. And then related to the pedestrian-oriented neighborhoods, our transportation department is currently working on the pedestrian master plan for the whole city. And one of the things they're studying is walk access. So that's the graphic that you're looking at on the left side of the screen. They've been working with consultants to develop this model where they study the sort of presence of pedestrian facilities, so the availability of things like sidewalks, trails, the quality of those facilities, and then the third piece that is sort of new to this kind of assessment is destinations. So are there actually places that people want to walk to in the area? So they've put that model together and run it for the whole city. This is East Boulder. You can see that we're not rating very high in walk access, so that's definitely something we'll be considering and looking at further. The next focus area is resilience and climate commitment. So citywide, we're trying to achieve energy system resilience. We want to improve our resilience to natural and economic disruptions and reduce carbon emissions. So one of the big topics in East Boulder, because this is where a lot of the city's major creeks sort of meet. We have Boulder Creek, South Boulder Creek, Wonderland, Skunk, Canyon Creek, all have a confluence in this subcommunity. So there's major issues to consider related to flooding and stormwater management. In East Boulder, 450 acres are in the high hazard and conveyance zones. A lot of this is in parks and open space land, but some is not, and we have to be really sensitive as we plan for the future of some of these areas. And then also, taking into consideration the 100-year floodplain, the 500-year floodplain, we see those types of events happening more frequently. We have 3 emergency management facilities that are also located in East Boulder. Up near the airport is the Emergency Operations Center. So they coordinate with the city and the county to respond to flooding and wildfires. The airport also serves some important functions for rescues and wildfire management. And then the county's communication center is located in this area. They're responsible for taking calls 24 hours a day, and they dispatch law enforcement, fire, medical, search and rescue. So important facilities for the region. And then another kind of key component that we're looking at and studying related to stormwater management and air quality is our urban forestry. And right now we measure that in canopy coverage. So urban forestry's goal citywide is a 16% canopy coverage. In East Boulder, right now we have less than 5%. So the 4th topic area is about small and local businesses. Citywide, we are proactively trying to support small businesses through loan programs and grants. And we're also looking for ways to retain these businesses and keep them in Boulder, and hoping to find ways to provide affordable business space. So as I mentioned before, there are 820 businesses in the area. We don't currently have a way in our data to classify what's a small local business versus a larger business. But in February, as part of that What Do You Love About East Boulder exercise, a lot of people identified some of the small local businesses in the area that they really love. And so those are certainly folks that we want to reach out to and work with. We've also been working with the Arts and Culture Department to identify all the arts-related businesses in the area, and we have a running list of those if folks are interested. Providing affordable space for these businesses is something we believe is going to be really important for consideration in the East Boulder plan. Historically, I think a lot of businesses have chosen to locate in East Boulder because there was affordable space, certainly more affordable than some other areas like downtown. Some of the current rental rates for different types of business spaces are listed here. These are currently still less than other business hubs in the city like downtown, but they have been trending upwards, and we are aware that some East Boulder businesses have chosen to relocate both outside the subcommunity and the city. Related to arts and culture, so we're looking for ways to include arts in the community benefit policies. Is this group pretty familiar with community benefit? Okay. The other goal is to support arts and cultural experience. Oh, I thought there was a question. Okay. Other goal is to support arts and cultural experiences throughout the city. So some of the things we've collected data on include the amount of public art in the area. So there are 3 art pieces, but there's also things like murals that we're sort of interested in getting an inventory of because those have such a kind of visual impact on the area. I mentioned that we've got this list going of arts-related businesses. So far, we've identified over 20 arts and culture-related businesses, including places like art galleries, the Boulder Dinner Theater, Boulder Creative Collective. And then we're also looking at kind of what types of festivals and cultural events go on in East Boulder. We know about 3 of them. There is the Upslope Get Down, which is an event that takes place in Flatiron Business Park in collaboration with Upslope Brewery. They've got music, food trucks, games. There's also an aerial dance festival that's coming up at the end of this month. And then there's a big cyclocross, which I had to Google what cyclocross is, but it's a type of bike race. That's a big event that takes place in Valmont Bike Park. So now on to the juicy stuff. Housing, affordability, and diversity. So some of our citywide goals, as described in our comp plan, include increasing the number of affordable units, increasing the diversity of housing types, and increasing the number of housing units in commercial and industrial areas. So some of the data we have so far. As I mentioned before, there's only one residential area that offers housing within the boundaries of the subcommunity. That area includes 313 home sites, and it's a manufactured home community, so they're all sort of a similar product. There's not a lot of diversity there. Let's see, and then related to increasing housing in industrial and commercial areas, about 55% of the subcommunity's land use is industrial, light industrial, or commercial. So we're gonna have to work with the community to consider where housing may be appropriate in these areas. The next focus area is about balancing jobs and housing. So again, looking at housing in commercial and industrial areas. And then another kind of big topic that falls under this category is about increasing access to multimodal transportation options to help alleviate some of the traffic that's generated by commuters from outside the area. So today, around 17,000 jobs. That includes people that are self-employed in this area, 820 businesses. We took a look at the number of residential properties that are within half a mile of the area, because that's sort of considered a reasonable distance for people to consider alternative modes of transportation like walking or biking. And there's around 3,000 properties. So just to clarify, that number is just properties. It doesn't indicate number of units or residents. And then the other thing we are studying, because there's so many businesses and employers in this area, is how many employers provide eco-passes. So 38 of the area's businesses provide eco-passes for employers. Our transportation department has found that the more eco-pass holders we have in the city, the more transit commute trips that we see. So, which isn't super surprising, but they did a recent study and found that a 20% increase in eco-pass holders has corresponded with a 10% decrease in single occupancy vehicle trips, which is pretty significant. But we know that, convenient access to bus routes and transit stops plays a key role in this. And so it's something that is an issue in this area, and we will continue to study. So that's sort of a really brief snapshot of some of the stuff that we've been collecting and studying and looking at. We're working on a more comprehensive report that we hope to have out for review towards the end of next month, maybe early September. But I kind of want to just be clear, that is all sort of just the data, just the facts, what's in the computer. We want to really compare that with and supplement it with what we're calling experience-based data. So the human experience of being in and around East Boulder. What do people like or not like about East Boulder? How are they using the area and moving through it? And we have to go out to the community to understand this and really complete that picture of existing conditions. So there's all kinds of ways that we can collect this type of data. Primarily will depend on the community to tell us what their experiences are. We have a couple of things going on to complete this experience-based data. The first thing is this East Boulder Working Group inventory session that just happened earlier today. A lot of great discussion, a lot of great input on some of the things that maybe we have mapped that they found from their experience to be inaccurate. So we'll have to go back and look at some of that data. And then a lot of really interesting questions generated from that group, things that they really want to know more about that we're going to study.
Quick question.
Yes.
So when you're doing these working sessions, is it just with residents of this area, or is it people who work there as well? Like, what's the makeup?
Yeah, so there are 21 members and then a planning board liaison. There are residents of the San Lazaro neighborhood. There are residents of the neighborhoods south of Arapahoe who have kind of great interest in East Boulder subcommunity. There are business owners, landowners, and people that work in the area but don't live there. Yeah. It's a pretty diverse crowd, actually. That's kind of people of all ages, which is really nice. And yeah, a lot of different interests. So then coming up in August, we're going to do these in-person engagement events. So we'll be hosting a series of events throughout the sub-community, different times of day, different locations, to ask people about their experiences with transportation, art, housing interest, all kinds of things, to collect that direct feedback from the public. Right now, it looks like this is going to be happening the second week of August. I think we're pretty close to locking down the dates and times. A couple of these are at businesses, so we're working with some of the folks in the private sector to organize that and make sure we're all getting what we need. And so in addition to those events, there will also be similar exercises available online for people to participate in. We will be combining all of the feedback that we get from both the in-person events and the online participation with our staff inventory work, and that will all go into this inventory and analysis report. So as we move into this community engagement process, really getting at questions related to housing and trying to assess kind of people's temperature about housing in East Boulder. I would love to hear from this group. What would you like to ask? What would you like to know from the community about existing housing or potential future housing in East Boulder? And then, you know, whatever questions this group comes up with, we're all going to talk about them, and they'll be included in what we ask the community when we go out. I can also answer questions about the data if that stuff comes up.
I'm going to start real quick just with, can you go to just any of the maps? Mm-hmm. Great. Does the East Boulder include the airport itself?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And has there been any talk about utilization of that piece of property as something other than an airport?
So right now, we are just collecting information, just looking at existing conditions. We are collaborating with Transportation Department, and I know that the airport will be doing or updating the airport master plan, I think 2024, but sort of around that time, if that's not the right year.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Judy?
Of course, I have questions. Thank you so much. I thought that was fabulous, and
good.
congratulations on having a good meeting today.
Yeah,
That's nice.
it's such a good group.
I find this whole area fascinating, and I don't know as much about East Boulder as I should, but I'll try and keep my questions just to housing. Are there some farms or agricultural properties in this land?
So historically, there were. That land has transitioned from more agricultural to a lot of the area was mined, kind of early 1900s, and that's why there's so many ponds out there. It's leftover mining pits. But today, there's no agricultural land. There's quite a bit of open space, and actually, the city is the largest landowner in East Boulder.
And although there are no other neighborhoods other than San Lazaro, are there a sprinkling of houses here and there, or are there hardly any houses but San Lazaro?
No, it's really just San Lazaro.
Huh. And my last question is, and again, it may be too premature for you to know this at this point, but do you think then there will be the possibility of some residential building in this area?
I think that incorporating housing in East Boulder is definitely something worth studying and exploring with the community. I think there's some great potential and opportunity for housing there, but we haven't tested anything or talked to the community about that yet.
So what strikes me is when we talk about jobs, housing imbalance, that this is clearly an area that it exists at a very sort of imbalanced level. So what has always struck me about this, I live just south of this, and I used to work north of it. So whenever I drove through the Flatirons Business Park, especially in like the later evening, it's just a dead zone of activity altogether, because people are just there for the day, and then nothing really is going on at night at all. So that's always been weird to me, that we have such a part of town, and it's a pretty big part of town that's completely unutilized about 14 hours out of the day. So I think this is definitely an opportunity to put more people closer to where they work, as well as maybe think about having some utilizations for that space when it mostly is unutilized for a large portion of the day.
Yeah, you know, as the area kind of developed over time, there was a lot of heavy industry and a lot of land uses that really aren't attractive for people to live. That has shifted a lot. And so things that were heavy industrial that produced a lot of noise, a lot of smells, things like that, have transitioned out, not entirely. We definitely have some major industrial facilities out there still. But a lot of them have turned over to office. And so office is a little bit more compatible with residential. And so I think that's where we may see some flexibility and potential for incorporating housing.
I'm just curious, I know you're focused on this, but I'm looking at these 3368 properties within a half mile of the sub-community. In those areas, what's the jobs numbers there? In other words, a half mile is relatively close to this center, right? And so I suppose, you know, I also immediately respond by saying, man, let's get some housing in there, right? But it seems like there's already quite a bit of residential there, and so I'm just wondering, you know, how will you engage with, I suppose, you know, looking at the impacts from just outside the sub-community on the sub-community? That seems like you know, again, it grows it, but it seems like it's a significant impact.
Yeah, there are definitely some pretty dense residential areas surrounding there that provide some housing options. I would say the boundary line that's drawn on here is not limiting sort of our scope of understanding or what we will study related to impacts of any proposed plans. We'll certainly look at how any concepts may impact surrounding residents, surrounding businesses, kind of, East Arapahoe is a major transportation corridor, so that'll be really influential. So yeah, we'll be kind of looking both citywide, regionally to some extent, and but focused on what changes or impacts can we make directly within that area.
Okay, so that was my questions for us, but as far as what I'd like to suggest that you may want to ask the community is, first of all, I thought Jacques' idea was really good about including the people you ask be people in those neighborhoods just to the, is that the south? Just to the south of those neighborhoods? And to me, it would be sort of a two-parter of questions. And the first would be listing all the different types of housing that you could possibly think of, townhouses, apartments, single-family homes, whatever, and just say, I guess the first one would be, would you like to see more housing in this area? The second one would be, if so, which of these, pick as many as you like, would you like? And then the third question, just simply where? It would be an open-ended question. And that would be my thought for getting the most open community engagement.
That's great.
Those are pretty much echoing my questions, but an additional question would be, what is your level of interest in housing, in establishing housing in non-residentially zoned areas? And then what is your interest in mix of affordable, permanently affordable housing, and what types of affordable housing for purchase, for rent?
Is there a way to, how can I say this? Is there a way in East Boulder to figure out how much building coverage is on per parcel? So each private property owner owns their parcel, and then there's a building on it, and usually a parking lot for the most part out there. Is there a way to know that, how much is that building covering the land? Because the reason I ask that question is I think the best way to add housing to this part of town is by building it over the massive amounts of parking that's out there. I think this part of town is more function over fashion. Largely, it's maybe not, the most attractive place because it's largely older office buildings, industrial flex, all that kind of stuff, which serves a very important function. And I'd hate to see that go away to try to be redeveloped into something else that's going to be much more expensive across the board. So the way I think you can put housing here is to incentivize the property owners to say, hey, you have all this excess parking, you have all this excess property that's not being used right now, especially at night, and incentivizing them to build housing there, some of which obviously will be affordable, and maybe that's a way to incorporate housing into what is largely a lot of office buildings and industrial and flex type space. What I would hate to see is incentivizing property owners to redevelop, and thereby, when you do that, you're going to lose all this, what I'll call reasonably priced commercial space, and turn it into very expensive space. And then you drive out the local businesses even farther. So I think the incentive should be not to rezone or whatever tools to redevelop, but yet keep what's there because that's obviously working. You have an office building or whatever at $20 a square foot, or pick your use. But yet you have a lot of excess land, parking lots and whatnot. How can we use that excess land, parking lot to add housing? That's where I think the focus should be for housing in this part of town.
This is just an observation, a little different than the things that either of you notice about the neighborhood. I was recently at Upslope Brewery for an event, and I guess we left maybe around 10, and I was very surprised that many of the little individual units around there seem to have artists in them and seem to be having stuff going on that when we left Upslope, I thought that was pretty exciting to see. So it seemed like, it's not like they had a wild nightlife or they have a lot of restaurants right in that area, but they did seem to have something happening that I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, there are, because the industrial spaces allow, give artists kind of the room to work on big projects. The buildings are equipped with the type of sort of exhaust and things that they may need for, I don't know, blow torches, all kinds of crazy stuff. There are a lot of artists that are in this area, and the space is affordable for them today. So it definitely, we've been sort of uncovering more and more artists that are working out here, and a lot of them have art all over Boulder, so it's really cool.
I was just going to say, the question, I think, as is being alluded to here, is to expand out and ask that question: what do the property owners see as, I guess not only the property owners, but the property owners and the business owners or tenants see as their needs for the affordable workspace, and what they can both provide and what they need, and how that again might mesh with housing in their minds. Those tenants who are in those buildings working, and what kind of housing kind of alignment might work best for them that could get them, right there.
One of the things I mentioned earlier, we're going to be looking at the Opportunity Zone stuff tomorrow night, and one of the proposals that's going forth is to kind of put off the efforts to look at modifying the use tables in our zoning to allow more uses in light industrial to kind of align with this project. So I don't know if you've started to talk a little bit about that, but we do have a subcommittee working on use table changes that I'm chairing, and it would be really interesting to get some opportunities to kind of, maybe send some of our committee members to the public engagement, but also see what you're thinking in terms of not just residential, but maybe some additional retail or restaurant possibilities in light industrial. I think the concern that the City Council and Planning Board had was it does kind of, it's sort of a delicate question, so an area plan like this would be a really good opportunity to kind of make sure that unintended consequences are examined and things like that. So I don't know if you have anything that has been discussed yet that you'd like to share, or just kind of put a placeholder on it.
No, so part of the subcommunity is within the Opportunity Zone, and so we will be looking at how those, how the plan influences the Opportunity Zone opportunities, and how the Opportunity Zone opportunities and challenges, I guess, can play a role in what we plan for the future of this area. But we are working with Community Vitality to sort of look at some of the kinks of the program and see where we might align. But I don't have any other information beyond that.
Well, just looking at some of those numbers and the 0% population and 17,000 jobs, I think maybe some little insight, like on the ground insight from people who are from that area, in terms of what are the commuter traffic patterns like, from their own experiences, from their subjective experiences. Looks like there's probably a lot of people driving in there. Where are they driving in from? Jacques brought up a good point. If it's just from the adjacent communities, and that's where most of the housing is, that really speaks to a lot of the need or demand. I think another interesting question would be what areas seem to be antiquated, or, I kind of agree with the sentiment that not really redevelopment, but, what areas could stand to have some improvement or some vitalization brought into it, that maybe housing can support. And from the business owners, do the business owners support housing? I think, housing for actual on-site employees. I mean, that's another important part of housing in a lot of areas like this. Like when we talk about like an artist studio, the concept of having an artist studio that's also residential can be wonderful, right? And with a lot of these other businesses and with office parks, et cetera, right? Is there a way to bring housing to there that really is for more on-site employees or area employees? And then the other one is what transit improvements could be made that can make it more suitable or more accommodating to people living there, because I think that's probably an issue, and from my experience over there, I've seen that as an issue. And the last one is what support is there for like height variations, because certainly going back to that notion of on-site employees and the upstairs, downstairs model, and I know that a lot of the buildings there tend to be of the more expansive, lower profile, more expansive buildings. And is there some way where some more flexible zoning on things like height or setbacks might make it more accommodating for housing without losing the industrial, which is, essential for any community, right? And we have that tendency to, okay, we'll just put everything over the industrial, but you need it. You have to have somewhere to have a toll lot, et cetera. So those are some things that I think, maybe people that live there that have a good feel for, the ebb and flow of how those things feed into the community, and then how suitable that community can be to introduce housing and affordable housing over there, because certainly there's room, there's space, and there's jobs and not a lot of residents. So.
If there's no other comments, we'll wrap that there. Great.
Great.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Yeah, thanks so much for your input.
All right, next up, under matters from the board, we have committee and project liaison reports. This is specifically for the engagement committee, and we're going to do a quick discussion on the approach to the August listening session. So just to remind everyone, we're talking about how to raise money for affordable housing at the August listening session. We're hoping to have a similar layout as last time, where we go sit down with the crowd and sort of have a roundtable discussion. Some additional things that we're hoping for this one is staff to provide the ways that we already do raise money for affordable housing, and some of the ways that we can't due to certain laws or restrictions that we have. So that, Jay, I'm hoping we can actually have that kind of typed up in advance, so we can send that out to the groups that we have planning on coming, just so they have some idea of like what we already do and what we can't do. Is that possible, anything?
Let me ask.
Okay.
I mean, at a minimum, we could probably get a PowerPoint together to give you a sense of what will be covered.
Sure.
In terms of a detailed memo, probably not.
Okay. Yeah, whatever you can get us in advance would be beneficial for sure. That way we don't have to go through a whole lot of the questions or suggestions that might not even be possible. So, Judy, do you want to? Yeah.
I'll add just a couple things. We took the list of affordable housing providers that had been given to us by staff for our last one, and then we also built a list of all the groups we could think of that might be interested, like Better Boulder and Plan Boulder and everything else in between, the homeless shelter, the Center for People with Disabilities. Boulder Housing Partners is having someone speak for a few minutes too about sort of their wish list and what they do for affordable housing. And so we already sent out an email, a save the date email, and have already received 4, 5, 6 responses from people, and then we'll send something else out again. We're working with Zach from the communications department, and he's going to help get things on Nextdoor, Boulder, and put it out through all the city information. And he gives us good ideas on how to message properly. And we sent out, that you might not have seen yet, I'm afraid, the what we were hoping to have be the letter to the editor. Do you want to mention something about that? Okay, I think, because you sent it out, not me, I think we wanted feedback by the end of this month.
Yes.
And we have a word count of exactly 300 words. It can't be more than that. And it's just from me and Adam as the engagement committee. So if people have any reasons why they don't want it on, or they don't want to use their name on it because you can only send things in once a month or whatever, that's covered. And we'll do more publicity towards the end. Oh, I know. Zach said that it's possible that after the meeting's over and it's archived and available on video, he's going to see if it's possible to get something, a questionnaire on Be Heard Boulder, just asking people what their ideas were for how to raise money. Anything else we worked on?
No, I think that's it. So biggest takeaway there, if you have any edits to the letter to the editor, I'll send it around again. We're hoping for those by the end of the month. So that's kind of the action item there. Otherwise, we're going to take about an hour to an hour and a half of the next meeting, plan on that as the start of the August meeting. So it's going to be pretty full, considering we have that, and then also our recommendation. That's why I wanted to try to get as much on the table tonight for a recommendation for Alpine Balsam as possible, just so we don't have to butt several big things up against each other in one meeting.
Danny, if you have no idea even what the heck we're talking about, we'll talk to you afterwards and bring you up to speed. We're doing a couple of listening sessions with the public to try and increase public engagement and get more input about housing issues. Okay.
Great. Next thing, so we've kind of we put on our agenda as an ongoing item the annual letter to council. We did not schedule any time for that tonight, but keep in mind we only have 5 meetings until the end of the year. So at the next meeting, Jacques and I kind of did intend to hopefully put about 20 minutes on, which again adds to our kind of big list of things that we want to tackle next week. So that was kind of our commitment that we made, but Judy already sent out her list of things that she's interested in considering and having in the letter for council. So if you want to review those, make any additions or anything else that you might want to say in the letter to council, we got to start thinking about this right now so that we're not scrambling at the end of the year. Anything on that, Judy?
Yeah, I just want to repeat, these aren't things we're going to vote on at any of these meetings till much closer to the end of the year. These are just topics so we can all get familiar and find out sort of a sense of what people are interested in, since this letter is going to be especially important because there'll be a brand new council and they're going to be forming their work plan for the coming year. So any ideas we have about things we would suggest that they study, we will actually vote on at a later time, but right now we want to just start discussing it in some detail.
And the next thing under new business is a housekeeping matter from Judy. Do you want to explain that?
So there are a number of things that Adam and I have done on the engagement committee, which right now is really the only active committee, and we came up with principles that everybody voted on, and it went through many iterations before we arrived at the final one, and we've come up with various plans that everybody voted on. And I realized in going back through everything, it's almost impossible to find out which was the final version, because sometimes we changed text on that screen during the meeting. So I'm just asking that we all agree upon that whenever we vote on words or change recommendations or do something where there's an iteration over a month or two, that the final copy either be put on our packet for the next month if that works, or in the minutes, and it says on it final final approved copy and the date that we all voted on it, just as a housekeeping issue, so we don't all have different ideas of what's going on.
So Jay, I don't think that's necessarily anything we have to vote on. It's more like a best practice to put it in the following packet whenever we have an item like that.
Yeah, I mean, we're happy to do that. A reminder would be helpful, too. And we'll make sure it gets in either the notes or the packet. That's probably the easiest way to do it.
Perfect. Okay, matters from staff.
That's me. So I'll start with down payment assistance, but I also have some updates on community benefit, large lot, large homes, the TMP. You're talking about you have a full August agenda. All of these projects are kind of coming to a head right now. So we'll have to do some creative agenda planning for August. So let me talk about middle income down payment assistance. So I've been working on this for just over a year now, year and a half actually. And we went to council last night. Council, basically the direction they gave was to move forward with the pilot. We would issue bond or take out a line of credit of $10 million that would not raise taxes. So that's using the city's existing bonding capacity. I think there's a lot of confusion about that. I saw a couple emails today. And council, their direction was it really needs to focus on households earning 120% AMI and less. So that's the maximum. There's still some challenges with how it gets structured in terms of what the allowed appreciation rate would be for those deed-restricted permanently affordable homes. Let me back up. Does everyone know what the basic idea of this program? Danny, you can say no.
I understand some of it, but not all of it, yeah.
So the idea is to help middle-income households afford a home in Boulder. The city would provide down payment assistance up to $200,000 in some cases. Basically, and which is not that much if you're talking about a $600,000 home. Basically, the city would have to provide $138,000 to a household earning 120% AMI, which is roughly $120,000 for a family of four. So that assistance would be provided to the family in the form of a second mortgage. The city would basically loan the money. There would be no payments on that second mortgage, so it keeps their overall housing costs down for the first 10 years. At the end of 10 years, that payment would be due back to the city, so we could pay our lenders. And it would be due the principal, that $138,000 plus interest. So that homeowner would either have to refinance, or if they were to sell earlier, they would have to pay whatever was due at that point. So council basically reiterated the importance of making it affordable to households earning 120% AMI. They said that they want to keep the 10-year period, and they wanted to provide some form of potential hardship. If there was a challenge in terms of if your income does not go up over time, you might have trouble refinancing that balloon payment at the end of 10 years. So we're moving forward with a potential ballot measure this fall that would enable that, and then the program would potentially be up and running in January. But like I was saying, I think there's still a few questions because that first household we have to subsidize by $138,000. It doesn't buy down the price of that middle-income home. It deed restricts it, says it can only appreciate by 2%. So at the end of 10 years. There's still going to be a gap between what a 120% household can afford versus, today versus 10 years from now. Does that make sense?
Right. And would the deed restriction be for those 10 years, or would it be permanent?
It's permanent in perpetuity.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, Judy.
I just have something I don't understand that I'm sure you can explain to me.
I'll try.
And hopefully I'll understand it after that. Since you're using money that doesn't increase people's taxes on your pilot program, why does it have to go
To the voters?
vote?
So it's a TABOR, Taxpayer Bill of Rights requirement, that says anytime there's a multi-year obligation by a jurisdiction, there needs to be approval from the voters. So the ballot measure language is clearly going to state, all we're doing is using our existing bonding capacity, and it will not result in raising taxes. And the idea is the city's loaning this money out, right, but we're getting it back at the end of 10 years.
And you did explain it, so I understood it. Thank you.
Was there any, oh, I'm sorry, I don't have this on. Was there any consideration given to possibly having some portion of this trial examine non-permanently affordable properties that could appreciate for the middle-income homeowners, so that they, that there might be a different formula, a different path, and that they could realize the appreciation that those of us who buy market rate appreciate?
So the last night we presented two options. One was at 2% appreciation, another was at 4% appreciation, which would be roughly what it would cost the city to borrow the money. So there's a certain elegance in that. Council didn't even go for the 4%. And really the range is 2% up to 7%. 7% is market appreciation. That's basically what homeowners in Boulder have gotten in the past 10 years. So that 4% makes it extremely difficult for 120% AMI. Actually goes up to 194% AMI to be able to afford that. But council was pretty adamant that, and there was consensus around this, that it really needs to focus on middle income. That if the AMIs keep increasing, that we're not serving the population that we want to serve.
Okay. And the permanently affordable units that are involved will be considered part of our 15% goal for 2035?
Well, currently the way it's defined, it's low, moderate, and middle income. So yeah,
so
assuming we're still serving people at 120% AMI, but that could be challenging. So we're not, council has also said that they're not promising that we would offer this type of subsidy to future buyers. So there is a potential that, because even with it increasing at 2%, there's still that gap in 10 years over any future purchaser. So if they can't afford, if someone can't meet the current requirements for income limits or asset limits, the city might still have to step in and potentially purchase that property.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Okay.
Was there much discussion on the notion of how this might impact the lending potential on those properties? Because I think it's a lot different than when you have a development that's, affordable, local workforce, et cetera, because you're taking a market unit and then you're putting those constraints on it. And I've just seen, I've had a lot of experience with banks just trying to wrap their heads around it and stuff like that. So I'm just curious if that was one of the things that, you guys wrestled with.
A little bit, but Boulder has some pretty good experience with the deed restriction program. Local lenders are familiar with how it works. So, we currently have over 800 homeownership units in the program that are deed restricted. But it is a different scale, right? And so you're talking about middle income, you're talking about bigger dollars, a bigger potential gap. And that was discussed, sort of what happens if you try to refinance and your appreciation has been limited.
Right.
But I think the discussion was that at the end of 10 years, you've built up sufficient principal, you are required to have a down payment, so you do still have some skin in the game, and that theoretically should cover you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So is this essentially just trying to get more sort of lifetime owners who don't really have the intent in selling after a long time?
I wouldn't say so.
Okay.
I mean, I think that it's recognizing that the average tenure of an affordable home in Boulder is 7 years. So a lot of people, this is going to be probably maybe their first home purchase. And particularly if they earn well above 120% AMI, they're going to move on to something else.
So more foot in the door then.
Exactly. The idea is We have, well, it's one method to get additional inventory of permanently affordable housing.
I'm confused. So this program is for existing middle-income affordable housing, already deed restricted? Or are we talking about deed restricting additional housing with part of this program?
So the idea is we are providing assistance for home buyers to purchase homes on the market. And then
Free market homes?
free market homes, yep. And
Oh.
so say the asking price is $600,000, at 120% AMI, you can't afford that, right?
Sure.
So you need some assistance. So in exchange for that assistance, say $138,000, we say you're going to have to
Deed restrict.
accept a lower appreciation rate.
Understand.
Perpetuity.
I thought I understood, and now I'm just questioning. So if you didn't do the deed restriction, though, it would give I mean, it certainly wouldn't add to our affordable housing goals overall necessarily, but in 10 years, there would be a much larger leverage for refinancing or selling and upgrading to a different home. So why, again, wouldn't we go with that as part of the pilot? And why did council stay just 2%, I guess?
So the belief is that with the 2% appreciation limit, then it's more likely to be affordable to middle-income households.
Okay.
So again,
So just getting it into the program. Okay.
Permanently affordable, deed restricted. You're right. I mean, your typical down payment assistance used elsewhere in the country is you offer a low or no interest loan. Some are grants, and that helps people buy into the market. But Boulder would be actually the first to require a deed restriction in exchange for that assistance.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, there's more. What else we got? So community benefit. Community benefit is still awaiting for analysis from a consultant to sort of figure out what we can do. So are you guys familiar? The original ambitions for community benefit were extremely broad. Council's direction was let's focus it down to really just affordable housing. So that work is underway. They have planning board scheduled for September 5th and go to council on September 17th and October 15th. So that's happening right now. We can come back to it. But large homes, large lots, that's going to planning board August 15th and city council on the 13th and 17th of September. And then the TMP, Transportation Master Plan, there's a draft out in mid-August, and they're going to council on September 17th.
Could you repeat the large lot dates?
That is August 15th at Planning Board, and then City Council September 3rd and September 17th. So that's the current schedule. You heard Jean's response before about Alpine Balsam, but there is kind of this convergence that typically happens before an election. There's a desire to get a lot done. So, so I apologize, but a lot of this happens, and it's not something that staff can necessarily control. So it's a lot of different projects that I know there's interest from this board on, and you may not have the time and the capacity to respond to them all.
So the only one I heard that we might have the chance to push into September was community benefit.
Yes.
And that already has been whittled down essentially to affordable housing. So there's probably not a whole lot we can provide there.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
I mean, I would say that's actually the one that is, of them, is most pertinent to.
Okay.
I would also say, I didn't know that about community housing, that they'd whittle, a community benefit, that they'd whittled it down to just affordable housing, and I'm pretty excited, and I bet, you know, the recommendation we'd make is yay. So I just thought that was really good news.
Well, the big question is sort of how much can you require?
Pardon?
The big question is how much can you require?
110%? Okay, thanks for that update. It sounds like the agenda committee has some considerations to make. Great.
And one other thing for you.
Yeah.
So the whole issue of conflict of interest, just a quick reminder. So Erin Poe, the city attorneys from the city attorney's office, sent everyone an email. Was that in June? So, and I just pulled out one important sort of nugget. So if you do not believe that your participation in a meeting would violate a prohibition or expectation in the code of conflict, primarily impartiality, then she recommends giving a statement on the record at the start of the matter to the effect that you believe you can be impartial and you will consider all of the information provided. So I think that's keeping in mind all of Erin's advice over the past months and years, but I think that's just a good practice to consider. And also I just wanted to mention council on July 16th, they did have a discussion about board and commission expectations, particularly around social media. So if you weren't aware of that, it's hour 5 and 28 minutes. And the city attorney's office offered to provide an update to the guidelines to include social media norms and expectations. So I don't know exactly when that's going to come back, but it should be fairly soon. So I just wanted to share that.
Did you say that was July? What meeting was it? July?
July 16th.
16.
528.
Anything else for Jay? Jay, anything else for us?
Yep.
All right, debrief real quick. Anyone have anything to say about the meeting, plans for the next meeting? Oh, hey, Juliet.
Hey, nice job staying on schedule.
I love it.
So happy.
All right.
I can't believe the time on the clock right now.
I'd like to debrief for just a 20-minute debrief.
Oh, great.
For y'all. No, I just want to say that kind of discussion-wise and kind of the colloquy or whatever, that flow, I thought was good to just kind of get that sense of where we're at and what things, we actually can dig into a little bit to maybe get to some good results. So it was good.
So next time around, I'm definitely going to try to stick firmly to timeline. That's going to be a big part of fitting in everything we have to fit in. So whenever you're, try to come with your statements ready. Jay, any information about anything that we can have in advance that we don't have to review within the meeting itself would really be beneficial. That's sort of a best practice of the board to try to get things ahead of time and review them. And yeah, that way we can sort of keep our timelines a little tighter and go home on time. So, great.
Yeah.
Let's, anyone motion to adjourn?
Nobody wants to tell.
Move to adjourn.
I'll second. Everybody second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
We are adjourned.
Live from Paris, on France 24.